The whole point of having money is to feel free. David Lynch wrote that in 2018. By then, he was 72 years old. He had directed some of the most revered films in cinema history. He had final cut on every project since 1986. He owned the rights to his most famous creation. He had, by any reasonable measure, complete creative freedom. And yet, relatively speaking, I guess I have some money now, but I've never felt free. It's the weirdest thing, he called it. This confession from a man who had spent 40 years building an empire of absolute control, who negotiated contracts like a general preparing for war, who turned down studio after studio rather than compromise a single frame. How does a man construct such an impregnable fortress of artistic freedom and still feel like a prisoner inside it? This is the story of David Lynch and the prison he built to protect his dreams. You know the images, even if you don't know why. The road at night disappearing into darkness, the red curtains, the woman in the wig, her face splitting between innocence and horror. David Lynch didn't just make films, he built a visual language so distinct that we named it after him, Lynchian, an adjective for the uncanny, the beautiful, the deeply wrong. He won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. He defined a television era with Twin Peaks, then redefined it again 25 years later. He is, by every conventional measure, an artist who won, who beat the system, who forced Hollywood to accept his terms or lose him entirely. But here's the thing about winning. Sometimes the victory consumes the victor, because behind the mythology of David Lynch, the cigarettes, the coffee, the transcendental meditation, the art life, there was a man who admitted again and again that he felt trapped, out of control, afraid. And the more control he gained, the more trapped he seemed to become. This isn't a biography. It's a case study in the impossibility of creative freedom. David Lynch spent his life constructing absolute control, final cut, total ownership, micromanaged perfection, because he believed that control would set him free. But the fortress he built to protect his art became his prison. Every contract he negotiated, every compromise he refused, every battle he won was evidence not of liberation, but its absence. To understand why, we have to go back to 1984, to the moment everything went wrong. Dune was supposed to be his masterpiece, Frank Herbert's epic novel, a universe of sand and prophecy and giant worms. Universal Pictures gave him $40 million. They gave him a producer, Dino De Laurentiis, legendary, powerful. They gave him everything a young director could want. Everything except what he actually needed. Lynch didn't have final cut. It was his third film, and he was still naive enough to believe that his vision would be protected. He shot for months, delivered a 3-hour assembly, watched as the studio took it away and returned something else, something butchered, something that wasn't his. Dune cut me off at the knees, he said years later. Maybe a little higher. The film was a disaster. Critics hated it, audiences stayed away, and Lynch, who had never failed before, not like this, learned a lesson that would define the rest of his life. Never again. Never again would he surrender control. Never again would he trust a studio to protect his work. From that moment on, David Lynch would rather make a small film with total freedom than a blockbuster with none. He would rather earn less, own more, fight harder. He would build walls so high that no one could ever reach inside and touch his art again. But walls that high cast very long shadows. Blue Velvet came next. De Laurentiis again, but this time Lynch negotiated differently. He would take half the salary. He would slash the budget to $6 million. He would work with almost nothing, but he would have final cut, complete and absolute. He made a masterpiece. Then came Twin Peaks, television, the lesser medium, but Lynch saw something no other film director did: freedom in serialization, stories that could breathe, characters that could live. He and co-creator Mark Frost negotiated ownership rights that first-time showrunners never got, rights that would make them millions in syndication. Lynch, the supposed naive artist, was becoming a brilliant businessman. The French came calling next. Francis Bouygues, billionaire industrialist, founded CB2000 to give auteurs total creative freedom. In France, final cut was guaranteed by law. Directors had to sign off on their films as works of art. Lynch made Lost Highway there. He made Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. He signed a $60 million three-picture deal. He was listed as co-producer, increasing his financial stake and long-term control. He had everything he had ever wanted. And yet, "I'm not a very wealthy director," he told an interviewer in 1990. This from a man with a mansion in the Hollywood Hills, a recording studio, production company headquarters, a man drinking Chateau Langebages with his agent. The money wasn't the point. The control wasn't the point. Nothing was ever enough because nothing could fix what Dune had broken. In 1999, Lynch tried to return to television, a pilot about a young actress coming to Hollywood, a Twin Peaks spin-off in spirit, if not in name. ABC gave him $7 million, but this time the control slipped. He didn't have final cut. The network wanted changes, 30 of them. They said it was too slow, too strange. The meeting where they delivered the news had dozens of executives in the room. Lynch sat through it in silence. Then he fell into what his collaborator Mary Sweeney called deep depression. She explained, "It wasn't cold feet, just a deep depression at this obstacle to overcome." The pilot was rejected anyway. Lynch refused to work on it further, claimed the sets were destroyed. His producer, Tony Krantz, who had sided with the network, was cut off entirely. Only a legal threat from Disney brought Lynch back to the project. Studio Canal bought the rights, gave him the control he demanded, and Lynch reshaped the material into something extraordinary. Mulholland Drive became his masterpiece, but the making of it nearly destroyed him. Years later, he would push even further into pure freedom. Inland Empire was shot piecemeal over 3 years with no completed script. Digital cameras let him improvise constantly. He was making exactly what he wanted, exactly when he wanted, answerable to no one. The result was brilliant and almost unwatchably fragmented. His producer, Sabrina Sutherland, who had become his bad cop, the one who told him what he couldn't do, admitted that Lynch had started to drift, that he might have benefited from tighter constraints, that absolute freedom without the tension of limitation was producing work that lacked something. The fortress was complete, and the artist inside was suffocating. In 2014, Lynch tried one more time. Twin Peaks: The Return. Showtime wanted 9 episodes, tightly budgeted. Lynch wanted, he didn't know how many, more, as many as it took. He couldn't say in advance. They almost walked away, Lynch and Sutherland both. "If they say no to anything," he asked her, "are you good with walking away?" She was. They presented their ultimatum. Showtime caved. $40 million, flexible episode count, total freedom. 18 hours of pure, uncompromised David Lynch followed, some of the most extraordinary television ever made, a final, towering achievement. He was 71 years old, and he still didn't feel free. There were other projects, a Netflix series called Unrecorded Night halted by the pandemic, a Robert Johnson biopic that never found funding, new ideas, new possibilities, always just out of reach. In the months before his death in January 2025, he and Sutherland were preparing to work again, getting the band back together, she called it. It wasn't to be. The whole point of having money is to feel free. David Lynch spent 40 years proving that money doesn't buy freedom, that control doesn't create safety, that the fortress you build to protect your art can become the very thing that imprisons you. Perhaps freedom was never something you could negotiate for, never something you could contractually secure. Perhaps the artists who feel free are simply those who never lost it in the first place. Lynch lost his in 1984, and he spent the rest of his life trying to build a bridge back to it, one contract, one battle, one perfect frame at a time. He never made it. If this resonated with you, if you've ever chased a freedom that kept moving further away, subscribe. We're all trying to find our own light in the darkness.